what kind of, well, you know this about the Lord anyway, but you see it in just how things show up here. Pure river, water of life. And then he says it's clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. That's the way the Lord likes things. He likes things clean and he likes things pure and he likes things clear. And just knowing what the Lord is like, even in seeing something there that you say, well, how can that impact my life? I mean, just seeing something like that. Well, don't you know that the Lord wants you to be pure, but he also, and when it comes to the will of God, don't you know that he plans on it being clear? You know, Christians walk around through life, well, how can I know the will of God? How can I know the will of God? Well, why don't you ask for it and ask him to make it clear to you? He likes things to be clear. You know, don't we use that? It's funny that he uses that phrase because we use that phrase all the time. Well, I mean, did you get it? Yeah, it's clear as crystal, right? You know, and that's who the Lord is. He likes things clean, he likes things pure, and he likes things clear. And verse 2, it says, in the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Another attribute of the Lord is life. In him is life. In him is light, and there's no darkness. Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Is that he's associated with, I mean, he's got two major attributes, and they're life and light, and you got life from him. Back over there in Genesis, he said he formed Adam out of the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils, and he became a living soul. So he put something of himself in Adam, and whenever he did, Adam became alive. So God is life. Life didn't come. When you think of what it takes to believe in evolution, you got to believe a lot of different miracles there. You know, in terms of the complexity of what life is, I don't even think that most people honestly consider it because they just trust that, you know, whoever's teaching in that science class is telling them the truth and nobody questions it. That at one point, you know, 4.6 billion years ago or whatever the year is supposed to be, they change it all the time and nobody really cares so long as it's really, really far or long ago, is that there was this puddle of just goop and you know, the weather conditions were just right and it got struck by lightning or whatever happened to it. You know, everybody knows that Frankenstein is science fiction, but that's the same story that they're trying to tell. You know, you ever watch any of the, you know, the Frankenstein would put all these dead parts together, you know, put the big rod up in the sky, and if we can just get electricity come down and zap it, it'll come to life, right? That's all evolution is trying to claim is just basically here's a bunch of dead stuff and electricity struck it and that brought it to life. It's science fiction for sure. Boy, it's a neat and interesting story, but there's no truth to it. Because if you look into what it takes for something like that to happen, there's no possibility of it in the world. In terms of you want to get down to the microscopic level of life and start talking about the protein chains and amino acids that got to come together in the right order at the right time, the there's not a single chance of it. And even if you could get that one single-celled organism to come to life, you ever walk around outside and see how many different kinds of life there are? Listen, if all life came from one single-celled organism that came to life one day, why isn't all life the exact same thing? It all started from the exact same amoeba, didn't it? And then that amoeba evolved into what? It just made more amoebas. When did it decide to become a two-celled amoeba? When did it decide that it wanted to have two genders? Boy, you get to where, listen, it's a lot easier to believe in creation than it is to believe in evolution. And I'm going to tell you what, by the end of it, if you study that thing out, you'll come to the conclusion that creation is more science and evolution is more faith. And you find that those two things flip flop. You're like, oh, you know, I just have faith that creation happened. Well, I have faith that it happened too, but I have a lot more science than than what they're claiming over on the other end. Don't know why I'm just all off on this, but it bugs me.
Well, even now, I mean, they've even tried to simplify it to the point of claiming DNA, and they've gotten, at least down in our part,
Hmm.
whatever, they're saying that we came from an ape.
Which
so they've gotten away at least from the lightning bolt and the two gender thing. I mean,
Well, they just skip it all. I
they
mean,
skip
they
all of it, but they go to that, well, we got DNA to prove
okay. Well,
that what's
if you want to combat the ape stuff, do you know why whenever whenever they do heart surgeries, that they do most of their heart medication testing on pigs? Because a pig's heart and your heart are the two most closely related hearts. In fact, whenever it comes to the DNA, there's only about a 2% difference between your DNA and a rat's DNA. They leave out all kinds of facts. They say, oh, our DNA is really close. You're really close to a lot of stuff that doesn't look anything like you.
Well, why are they not still evolving then?
Well, you came from a different kind of, but here's the other problem. If you want to claim archaeological evidence, they can't find, okay, there should be, if we've been around here, if mankind has been around for, let's say, 200,000 years, something like that. There's no, you have to have there should be intermediate species between the ape that mankind came from and where man is today. There should be just all kinds of fossil evidence that gets you from here to here. They can't find it. I've got a chart someplace of every time that they found, that's what they call, what they're looking for is a missing link, but really what you'd have to have is hundreds if not thousands of missing links to go from ape to man. They haven't found one, and every time they think they found one, it turns out to be a hoax. Now they'll publish it whenever they find it, but they never publish the hoax. And you go up, you can look up Neanderthal man, you can look up Nebraska man. I'm trying to think of, well, and I think, and I don't know if it's just called Lucy or what, but
Lucy's the
the,
one that they're trying to claim this teacher.
yeah, but it's a hoax. One of them that they found turned out to be an arthritic man in Russia. One of them that they thought that they found turned out to be a bone from a boar, but they don't report that. So all I can say that it'll do for you is that when you know the truth will make you mad. People think, well, if you learn the truth, that'll make you free. No, it'll really upset you, and you're just going to stay upset. But that fire is good for you. So because it gives you something to study and it gives you something to tell folks, and your sword will be sharper for it. So just stay by the book. Like I said, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 feet of books back there in my library, just on that subject. So you go back and borrow them or do whatever you want with them. That stuff's there. But um, looking at these things, it said in the midst of the street of it, on either side of the river, there was a tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded a fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Where we ended off with looking was these nations that go on into eternity. And there is going to be nations. He talks about them here. How are those going to be broken up and what are the boundaries? And we talked about 12 different kind of boundaries, um, and how you could probably maybe break up the world naturally with 12 boundaries. But the ones that I gave you last time, those may not be the distinction. In fact, it's very possible because when you go into eternity, after the great white throne seat judgment, or right before it, he says that he takes the universe as a garment and folds it and creates a new heavens and a new earth. So a new earth could have dramatically different geography than the earth that you're on if he creates a new earth, a whole new earth. So it might do little good at all to talk about whatever natural boundaries are on the earth that you're on, because the good indication is that the world that you're standing on isn't going to go into eternity. And it gives you an idea about, I guess, what I would call an infectious disease. And that is that the Lord, sin is the world's major problem. It's not global warming and it's not even cancer, but I think, and I might be taking this too far, but or maybe not far enough, but I think that there's a lot of stuff that sin causes that people aren't even aware of. You got a verse of scripture, where the Lord talks about creation. He says it moans and groans, waiting for the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, waiting for the Lord to come back. And it says whenever the Lord comes back, it says that uh, the mountains are going to sing and the trees are going to clap their hands. And you've heard me preach a sermon on that stuff. But there's part of me that wonders if sin isn't just so infectious. I think that that's what killed off any life that existed out in the cosmos, in the universe. You say, I tell kids all the time, I was like, man, you'd be amazed at what that Bible talks about. And it talks about aliens and it talks about demons and devils. And I think they're the same thing because I don't know if anybody's wondered. Well, and that's what your astrophysicist and some of these Neil deGrasse Tyson, some of these guys are uh, bothered with is that you ask, they do a podcast and say, what do you think about aliens? Well, if there were aliens and the universe was that big, and they are that smart that they could do interstellar flight and all that kind of stuff, why would they be interested in coming here to look down on a planet of basically insects in their sight kind of thing? Well, the problem is one that they're not more highly evolved um, beings that evolved on another planet faster than us. They're devils. They're fallen angels, is what they are. And if you consider why mankind can't go to the stars, it's because of Adam and Eve's sin in the garden, and it killed the original plan that mankind was supposed to inhabit those places. And you find here in Revelation 22 that the Lord goes back to that original plan of sending mankind back out to the stars in a pre-fall Adamic state. But everything out there is dead. And so if you had devils, and he talks about it in Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2, whenever the devil comes to present himself and the fallen angels come to present themselves and says, where have you been? Well, going to and fro in the earth. Well, what is their, I mean, the reason that they're coming back and forth to the earth is that one, the third heaven's way up there, and two, this is the only living place in the whole universe. Everything out there is dead. Yeah, Brother David. No, I don't got any holy water. Cool. Anyway, so um, so I think in addition to that, and imagine if that's what sin could do to the universe in a day, and the Lord had to quarantine the planet to keep sin and mankind from spreading out to those stars, and then he's quarantined all sin to this one planet. Well, think what that would do to a planet over a course of about 7,000 years. What is it? It's infested. Not only that, but when he talks about over in the Old Testament, he talks about um, whenever somebody's murdered, but the killer's never caught. It says the blood cries out from the ground. Well, you know what you have with 7,000 years of war and murder? Man, you're on a bloody planet. I mean, the Lord can do a lot, and the millennium is going to be great. But at the end of the day, you're on a rock that has been just infested with a people that have been doing nothing but sinning night and day and night for 7,000 years. And at the end of it, the best thing the Lord says he can do is just put it away. It's like, well, you need a new heavens and a new earth. Because of what? Because of sin. And I think sin has a lot to do with a lot of things that go on in the world. If you want to look at storms and tornadoes and hurricanes and all that kind of stuff, man, it's not climate, it's sin. Earthquakes and volcanoes and wars and rumors of wars and all that kind of stuff. And I'd add to that thing, I'm not saying that it's on necessarily an individual basis, but one of two things is happening. Either we're getting close to this thing wrapping up, and the genetic material that makes up mankind is falling apart. And that's why you see just disease and cancer. And I don't know if you've noticed this. I noticed this just because I'm in a public school and I remember what it was like 20, 30 years ago. I didn't know anybody that had a dairy allergy. I didn't know anybody that had a gluten allergy. I mean, I had a bee sting allergy, and I was probably the only kid in my class that had an allergy. Now everybody's got it. Everybody's got, I'm not saying it's not real, but I'm saying, man, something is going on. Something is up. I'm looking out over my classes. And it used to be over the course of, I mean, and there was a bigger class size whenever I was a kid than they are now. But you might have um, maybe one or two in a class that would have maybe a 504 or an IEP. I've got a class now where it's more than half the kids have some sort of learning disability. Now you could blame it on pharmaceuticals or blame it on whatever, somebody would blame it on processed foods or whatever. I don't know, but I'd say if you're going to sit down and blame something, I'd blame sin. And I'm not saying that a person's sin caused them to have a disease. I'm talking about collective sin of mankind has caused problems. And you're breaking down. Go ahead.
30 years ago, buying calves get doctored with probably 2 antibiotics
Yeah.
and got most things, and now there's probably 100 of them out there today. And, I mean, you just got to keep giving stronger
Yeah.
and more to
Yeah.
to get. So I mean, it's the
Yeah.
whole thing is like that.
Yeah, and it's top to bottom. It's not just people. It's our, and somebody could claim, well, we started doing this, and I know this. I mean, if we take our kids to the doctor, depending upon where we go, doesn't matter what it is, and it's frustrating because we could know it's viral, and they'll send us to the pharmacy to get an antibiotic for anything and everything, even when an antibiotic's not going to clear it up, and that drives me crazy. And so there's probably a lot of problems that are just bad medical practices that have produced a lot of it. But I would again, knowing that all things go by the book, I'm going to say that mankind's biggest problem, top to bottom, inside and out, is sin.
It's all just been breaking
And it's breaking down. I'm not saying that your personal sin caused your personal cancer, but and that could, I mean, I won't count it out, but I'd just say that you're at the tail end of what mankind can be. And I don't care what they say, we're going to solve death, and man, you haven't figured, for every disease you think that you found a cure for, three more popped up, and stuff you never even heard of before. So I don't think they're getting on top of it. I think they're falling way behind on a lot of this. Now, is cancer the death sentence that it used to be? No, not as much. It's not quite the death sentence that it used to be, but it's more prevalent than it used to be. So and it's just I mean, I guess you could call me conspiratorial and all these things, but I think at the end of it, the Lord has his reasons for saying, listen, we're getting the earth it was good for 7 days. And now that we've got death and hell been cast into the lake of fire, we've got mankind's sin issue taken care of, and I'm here to oversee it, and I'm going to be your God, and I'm going to sit on the throne here, and I'm going to run this thing, and there's a tree of life over there. We might as well start with a new earth and even a new heavens. Let's just start fresh and new. And so and the whole thing will be life. And so if it's anything like this, or I mean, if it turned out to be this earth in some way, because back there, between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, he drowned out the earth, and you found that out over in First Peter. I want to say it's chapter 3, where he says the water that then was being in the water and out of the water. Um, if it did for some reason happen to be this old earth, the distinction of splitting those boundaries would probably be the old world. The Bible nearly always deals with events that take place in the Near East and Africa and Europe, and you'll find that nearly all the events that take place in the Bible are dealing with Palestine and Syria and Babylon and Mesopotamia and Asia Minor and Greece and Rome and the south end of Russia and the north end of Africa. But the reason why there are 12 gates in Revelation 22 that he tells you about is because there's 12 nations that are going to go into New Jerusalem, and they go in through these gates. Revelation 21:25. Revelation 21:25. and 26, it says, "And the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there, and they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it." Now, I talked about this last week, and again, like I said, it might be kind of an out there thought. The more I think about it, the more I kind of like it, is that New Jerusalem, what I think maybe one possibility for it, you notice that it's supposed to have 12 gates, is that if you can imagine, I use the illustration of a book, is that if the Lord does send those 12 Gentile nations to the 12 outer reaches of the stars, you could call them 12 constellations if you want, but if they've got to come back in their season to bring the glory of God, or bring their glory and honor into New Jerusalem to the Lord Jesus Christ, it would be interesting to me if what made that city special is that it's a four-dimensional object, not a three-dimensional object, but a four-dimensional object, meaning that time and space wrap around it to the point where that New Jerusalem, although it's on earth, is the access point to basically the 12 regions of the universe. And so wherever a region is, that New Jerusalem is there, but you go in at your gate, and when you come into the gate, you're in the New Jerusalem that's on earth, but you're also in the New Jerusalem that's everywhere. And says the gates aren't shut. So if you wanted to get to some place in the universe, you just go to New Jerusalem, you go in one gate, you come out another gate, you wind up somewhere else in the universe. And they're all connected. So instead of, we think of space travel as, well, if you think of space travel as, okay, I got to get from here to the moon and that's a straight line, or here to Mars and that's a straight line. But instead, if we took space and folded it over, well, then you didn't go anywhere, space moved. Well, think if you didn't have to go anywhere, all of time and space folded over that one specific object of New Jerusalem. And if you go there, you can from there go anywhere. Kind of like somebody who, cuts a little hole in a book and puts their whatever in it. Well, that would be New Jerusalem, and that it's folded up in the book. I don't know. That's my thought. I like it. It's probably wrong, but I like it because I keep looking at that city and I think there's got to be more to that city. There's something special about that city. He tells you about the designs of that city. I mean, I'm finding out stuff now. I've told you guys about the stones that make up the foundation of just the or just the attributes of those stones being unique to themselves as opposed to any other kind of stones, and the light that's produced by pure light coming through them. And you look at these 12, I don't know, the Lord being who he is. And well, one of the things, I was watching some stuff this week on basically dealing what is the fourth dimension, because you've got length, width, and height. And I think that to me, this is interesting because it brings into um, maybe some reality, a theory that I like about the judgment seat of Christ. And the theory that somebody gave me, and I like it, on the judgment seat of Christ is that for you as the believer, the judgment seat of Christ is happening right now. Because once you got saved, you're predestined to go to heaven. And so one of these days you're going to wind up in heaven to be absent from the bodies, to be present with the Lord. Whether you die or you get raptured up, you're going to go through the judgment seat of Christ. And I think what the Lord being, and the Lord is a much higher being than we are, they say that the fourth dimension is time. And so you take a location, and it's, so me just standing here, I'm on a two-dimensional space. You can go left, right, forward, or backwards. That's all you can move. In three-dimensional space, you can go left, right, forwards, backwards, up, or down. In four-dimensional space, you can go left, right, forwards, backwards, up, down, and forwards and backwards in time. And so the Lord could bring you back into time and fast forward you forward and back in time and walk you back through your life and have you give an account for it then. And it makes sense that that's the way that it is, because the third heaven is outside of time. And so he can come into it. And I've, Lord being who he is and the numbers in the Bible being what they are, I'd imagine that there's far more than 4 dimensions. I'd imagine that there's something like 7 dimensions. Um, but when you start to understand that, boy, just even the fourth dimension is kind of hard to wrap your head around. And then you start to try to imagine a fourth dimension. Let me give you, for instance, on how I'm going to maybe go over on time, but I think this is interesting. If you want to talk about 1 dimension, right? 1 dimension would be like a line with 2 points on either end. That's 1 dimension. Now, if we bring that into 2 dimensions, all we have to do is just imagine that these 2 points are the same point. That when you come off this end over here, you come back in over here. You say, oh, well, how would that happen? When you go from 1 dimension to 2 dimensions. Because whenever I come off over here, I wind up right back where I started. Okay, so you go up a dimension whenever you connect the end points of the previous dimension. Okay, so if we take a 2-dimensional object like this, and we say here's an end on either end here. Okay, if we want to make that a 3-dimensional object, okay, let me see, grab a sheet of paper here. Okay, I take a 2-dimensional sheet of paper and I take these ends and I wrap them around to this. Okay, so that it becomes a cylinder, but I haven't completed it yet unless I could wrap it around so that both these ends would meet over here, and these ends would meet over here, and that would make a donut. So now you're up to 3 dimensions. The hard thing to imagine is if I take a 3-dimensional object, something like this, if I want to go up a dimension, I have to have the sides meet the opposite sides. So that whenever you go out this side, you come back in this side. When you go up through the top, you come back up through the bottom. And when you go out the back, you come back in the front. And you can't draw that. And it's hard to understand that. And so the fourth dimension includes time. And if that's how complicated the Lord is up 1 dimension from what we can understand, and the Lord says, listen, if there's 3 dimensions and there's a fourth dimension, you could just about bet your life on it that there's 7 dimensions. And then you get over to Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8. I mean, I watched a video on just a brilliant person talking about this and couldn't understand what she was talking about. And she couldn't even, you can't go up a dimension from that. You can't describe a dimension up above that. The only thing that I could see about going up a dimension between that was somebody talking about if there was a being that could do that and you went up a further dimension, then they would be able to travel between possibilities, between different realities. That's what a higher dimension being would be able to do. You understand then that when you read Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8, and he says, my ways are higher than your ways, saith the Lord, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, as the heavens are above the earth. You know, like, man, I can't even get up. I can't even fully understand 1 dimension from what I live in, and he's probably another 3 dimensions up above that. Man, my thinking is pretty shallow. The wheel, well, yeah, that's and so he's got the wheel inside of a wheel in Ezekiel chapter 1 as a device to move the throne around, and it says that the life of the beast is, I'm just telling you that in terms of dimensional stuff, the Lord is up there. And when I start looking at stuff like that, I think, man, that object right there, I don't know that I mentioned this. I was watching some stuff on the Fibonacci sequence. I don't know if I brought this up. I talked to Caitlin about it, but I don't know if I brought it up here. But it was a secular guy talking about the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci sequence is where you add the previous 2 numbers to get the next number. So you got, let's say you got 0, 1. Well, 0 and 1 is 1, but 1 and 1 is 2, and 1 and 2 is 3, and 2 and 3 is 5, and 3 and 5 is 8, and you just keep going like that. And it has a ratio of, like, it's an infinite number like pi, It comes out to like 1.618, something like that, and it has a name. It's called phi, which they give it a Greek letter. But what you end up seeing with that is that at the rate at which it grows, produces something called the golden rectangle or the golden ratio. And you might have heard of the golden ratio, but that ratio shows up everywhere in nature. They even noticed that ratio or that spin whenever they shot electrons through the collider or the CERN Hadron Collider. They saw that the electrons were spinning off at an exact ratio. The seeds on a sunflower uh, expand from the center at that ratio. Petals on a flower grow at that ratio. Petals on almost anything grow at that ratio. If you look down at a corn stalk, there's always two leaves on opposite sides, but the rate at which they twist at each new layer up is a Fibonacci sequence. Even the growth rate of branches on a tree between a branch coming off and a new branch coming off is is the same ratio. In fact, if they overlaid a bolt of lightning over a tree and the expansion rate of lightning is almost the exact same ratio as the expansion rate of the growth of a tree. You see it everywhere. You see it in the spin of spiral galaxies. It's the same ratio, all the way from atomic structures all the way up into the galaxies. It's everywhere.
Like the fingerprint.
It's almost like it's a fingerprint of a designer. And this guy didn't even pick that out. And one of the things that he brought up, I'd have to watch it again to see how he got there, but he said there's an interesting thing about snowflakes. And and I don't know if you hear people say, well, all snowflakes are different. They're all different, but they're actually still all the same. Um, what was it? It was they all basically have that shape, and then everything builds off that. Almost every snowflake has 6 points. And so they tried to figure out, why is it that all snowflakes have 6 points? They're all different, but they all have 6 points. And this went back to a guy by the name of Kepler, and he was an astronomer. And his determination is based upon how molecules form in the upper atmosphere. They actually form inside a lattice. And if you can believe this, because he hasn't been sitting in on our Bible study, he said that the shape of the lattice that those molecules form inside of looks something like an and they use the phrase, what was it, octatetrahedron. What does that look like? It looks like New Jerusalem. This guy didn't know that. Kepler didn't know that. But that's what snowflakes form inside of before. And if you'll notice, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points that whenever it begins to form, it goes from 6 points three-dimensionally down to 6 points two-dimensionally. Whenever it comes in from the upper atmosphere all the way down, every one of those snowflakes is formed inside the same shape as New Jerusalem. You start to see how all this stuff is just the more, and the Lord doesn't tell you that. And he says, you like those snowflakes? There's stuff I know about the snowflakes you don't know yet. And he said, one of these days, there's going to be something come down out of heaven, and it's going to look like that, but it's not going to turn flat, and it's not going to be a snowflake. It's going to be my city. But up in that atmosphere, you know what's coming down all the time? New Jerusalem, New Jerusalem, New Jerusalem. But before it gets here, it goes flat. And you know what? Uh, the closest thing that you can relate manna to over there in the Old Testament, it's a strange round white thing that melts in the sun, doesn't it? What's that sound like to you? Doesn't it sound like snow? Well, I wonder what it formed in. I wonder if it came when it came down, if it came down in flakes like that. Wild, man. And You know, I've talked with Brother Donovan and different folks. I'm not saying this like this makes me anybody. All I'm doing is just watching stuff and paying attention to stuff. The folks that figured that out don't know anything about the Bible. The problem is that a lot of people that know the Bible don't pay attention to any of that stuff either, and then you never get to put the two things together and find out, man, that book is deep. It's fun. I enjoy it. Even if I get to the end of it and we get home to glory, it's like, man, you found so much wild stuff. There wasn't any truth in it. But man, you had fun. I'm sure I sound to the Lord like my kids sound to me. Dad, and just like, oh, I'm glad you're having a good time, man. So anyway, all right.
Snowflakes preview of coming attraction.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, like I think that stuff's cool. So do with that what you will. All right. But yeah, we'll get into some more of the stuff on the 12 gates and those 12 numbers and all that kind of stuff next time. I mean I covered almost none of these notes tonight, so we got